Hey, friends, welcome. It is God Moon Day, and I got up today and I had recalled earlier in the week that my friend Zach Ali and I had done this idea for sharing UTOK's formulation, especially the PTB formulation, periodic table of behavior, in the form of God's factory. I found that old PowerPoint and decided to take a little bit of time and share it with you today. So we are on God Moon Day. We're going to fly through the universe and honor it with gratitude and a sense of humility. And what I'm going to do is just walk you through a PowerPoint. It's 8:09, and I've got until 8:20 to do it. So it's less than 10 minutes to get through the universe from a UTOK perspective. I'll go ahead and share screen because we got to have a PowerPoint if I'm in action here. So, all right, here we go. We are on the journey. We're doing UTOK perspective, a UTOK perspective on God's factory. So, what do we need here? We need a God of source, and here we have the void and the beginning of the universe. We can recognize this as the Monday-Tuesday juncture. And then we have today, ultimately, the negentropic aspirational goodness, truth, and beauty iconically represented by the elephant sun god. We need math and logic. We need science. And if we're doing UTOK, we need an I-quad perspective on an I-quad rotation on the human subject. That's the human identity, awareness, epistemic, matrix structure. We can think about God's factory as a building from the tree of knowledge where we have a ground plane of existence making up the first 3 floors of matter object, the next 3 floors life organism, the next 3 floors mind animal, and then culture person. We then have a scientific and ideally in a UTOK framework, a wise philosophy that allows us to see the human subject in relationship to science in relationship to the transcendent. We zoom in through the lens of the PTB to realize that, yes, there are dimensions of behavioral complexity, there are aggregates that emerge, and then there are primary units of analysis. We're on a ground floor of energy information, and we jump up through particles and atoms and molecules, genes, cells, multicells, neuronal networks, animal-minded creatures, family groups, symbolic justifications, and the human mind persons, and ultimately family and communities, and expand in modern terms into nations. Now, the argument is that through our structure of understanding subjectively, intersubjectively, into scientific objectively, we map entities and fields across these relations, and we can then extract both the ontological layers of nature and see in the epistemology of science those ontological layers. Let's get to it. We have a basement, an energy information implicate order that starts the observable universe and then gives rise to quantum field theory. So we can see the cosmic microwave background radiation and breaking off of this, the 4 fundamental forces that have begun with a singular super force. That's the energy information implicate order at the beginning of the universe. And here's our basic cosmological model. At the bottom of our existence are quantum fields. And from that come point particles that basically represent particular kinds of vibrations, excitations in relationship to the field. Electrons are an example. They carry the negative charge. They move independently around the atom. And there are other examples of that. The stepping stone maps all of the elementary particles. The second floor are the atoms. They're going to be mapped by the periodic table of the elements. And the most basic element is the atom. Then we pop up atoms. And an example here is the water molecule. An example of 2 hydrogens and an oxygen give rise to novel arrangements of groups of primary units in the form of a molecule. And chemistry is the science. We can zoom out and think about the aggregate of the matter object dimension with the core field being the fundamental unit of a quantum field. And then particles are excitations and vibrations in that. Atoms are coalesced objects. Molecules are grouped. And then we start to extend, and ultimately something like a grain of sand, a boulder, a moon, a sun, a galaxy, and the universe itself gives us the scale of matter in 10 steps. We can then jump up to the first organization that we can, there are a number of different molecular, biological, biochemical organizations, but one I prefer to orient to is the gene, a fundamental unit of biological information that codes. In this case, an example would be coding for brown and blue eyes. Of course, genes are one part of the primary organization of life, which is the cell. Cells are the fundamental units of life. And we, of course, have many single-celled organisms. For billions of years, billion years, there was just single-celled organisms. Here's a basic frame for an organism called a eukaryotic cell that's got a nucleus. And here are prokaryotic cells without a nucleus, various shapes of bacteria, which are, of course, the prokaryotic cells actually in terms of numbers and mass are the largest amount of biological mass around. We can then jump up through eukaryotic cells into multicelled organisms. And a good example for us would be the tree, the flowering oak tree, as it were, and flowering in terms of course, reference to tree of knowledge there, tree of life. We can put scales across the dimension. There's microbiology, biochemistry into cells, into groups of cells, into multicellular organisms, into ecological systems, and ultimately across scales in the environmental sciences. We have then a tree of life, which of course is represented in the tree of knowledge. The seventh floor jumps us up into neuroscience. The fundamental unit are neurons and neural networks, which interlock sets of neurons, a kind of cell that appears in the animal kingdom and functions ultimately in their neural networks to coordinate them. Neural networks are distributed through jellyfish and send sensory motor signals and ultimately get organized into complex adaptive systems. And when that happens, we get animals, minded behavior creatures, which are animals with brains and complex active bodies, include arthropods, some mollusks, vertebrates, common housefly. Has a lot of nervous system equivalent to the human system. It's a complex adaptive body and a brain that coordinates the behavior of the animal as a whole and emerging around the Cambrian explosion. And of course, animals can jump up into groups where we consist of colonies, herds, etc. One example is an Argentine ant colony, that main super colony, which ranges over 6,000 kilometers, effectively forms, as far as we know, the largest cooperative unit or group colony system of any creatures, including humans in terms of numbers, that has ever been recorded. We can jump from the 9th floor into the 10th. Across now, we're going minded animals. We have the evolution of nervous systems into these basic structures of increasing complexification, allowing for increasingly sophisticated dimensions of minded behavior. The 10th floor gives us language and ultimately the ground structure of the human mind. Human language almost certainly evolved between 200,000 and 50,000 years ago. Other animals have elaborate networks of communication. They quote unquote talk in the base level of that. They undoubtedly even have symbolic communication, but they do not speak in propositions or engage in question answer dialogue, which gives rise to the problem of justification. And we see the emergence of language, and then this gets embodied in technologies. And in this case, we have a Sumerian writing tablet, the earliest forms of writing that evolved. On the 11th floor, we find you. The 11th floor is made up of human persons that are self-conscious actors, persons defined as a capacity to reflect on oneself, justify one's actions. Here I am walking us through the periodic table of behavior. And we can think of Adam and Eve as methodological exemplars in the mythos of asking, of prohibition, justificatory prohibition, of challenging the authority, of questioning, of male-female dynamics, of awareness, of shame. And this is a wonderful mythos for the emergence of the problem of justification, the problem of moral authority, legitimizing values and what is good and bad, and seeing the nakedness of ourselves and trying to do better to get closer to more transcendent ways of being. And then we have the 12th floor can be thought of as the collection of culture persons at the level of justification. And then we merge that ultimately with the emergence of the evolution of technology. It is the evolution of justifications and technologies that give rise to humans. In fact, humans with their social capacities to read each other's minds, as Michael Tomasello suggests, justificatory capacities, and then the evolution of technology ultimately gives rise to the organization in oral indigenous societies, and then as technological capacities to control nature, to manipulate nature into civilizations really emerge, we get societal organizational structures, which, as I note, consists of cultural justifications, shared practices coming off of behavioral investment theory, the technologies and industrial modes, and the biophysical ecology in which one is embedded. We can look back certainly at the Göbekli Tepe, one of the oldest sites of documented human civilizations, or maybe many older. And this one dating back to 9,500 BCE. So when we look at the culture person dimension of complexification, we get language, persons, tribes, cities, modern nations, and ultimately now we find ourselves in a global civilization. Where are we going? Of course, we're here at the fifth joint point. There's the digital machine beast that will become, our God overlord at the level of power and technology. And hopefully we'll have an aspirational wisdom that affords human transcendence and clarity about how to hold the stack across the dimensions. The point is that we can use the unified theory of knowledge to see the ontological layers placed between God of source and God of transcendence and observe essentially a 13th floor formulation. Recall the periodic table of behavior, like an ontological layered cake, like a God's factory that builds a building, enables us to go from an energy information singularity into particles, into atoms, into molecules, then across scale, into genes, into cells, into multi-cells cross scale, into neural networks, into minded animals, into groups of animals cross scale, and ultimately into linguistic justifications giving rise to human persons that are collecting themselves across scale. And now, through science and philosophical wisdom, we can identify human knowers as observing behavioral frequencies both within and without. The reason we can do that across the scales of floors of behavior, we can do that through the tree of knowledge system and the recognition that we can frame each unique subject with the human identity function of the I-quad coin. We can then bring the I-quad coin in connection to the tree of knowledge. You can marry the coin to the tree and see the waves from an energy information beginning to an energy information, integrated energy information reflection that enables us to rotate the coin to achieve our imaginal connecting to a real, to see complexification, including ourselves within it. And ultimately aspire to the moon, at least in the language of UTOK. It is God Moon Day. The moon is the location of a wise structure that we can orient towards to, and ultimately underneath that is God. And so the I-quad moon is where, in some ways, the aspirational garden, which is one pathway to find oneself to transcendence. Okay, there it is. That is, it's God Moon Day. And here we have, and it's 8:22, missed it by a couple of minutes, but still, we're pretty close, pretty good span. I hope everybody has a good day.